So talking to Andy backstage, I was telling him he's probably one of the most recognizable voices for meditation. And so maybe people don't recognize his face, but how many people have downloaded or tried the Headspace app? Okay. So it's like more people are introduced through meditation through Andy probably than anyone else, and he said that was a little humbling.
I said I don't know whether it's a good thing or not, but I'm happy.
Yeah, so I thought one really nice thing to start would be to lead us in a short meditation, if you're
Sure.
open to
Would you like to? Yeah? Okay. All right. So we'll do a short one. So I don't need to ask. I think I'm pretty sure everybody in here has done some meditation before. Even if you haven't, don't worry. I'll talk you through it. So yeah, take a moment to get comfortable. So I recommend you just uncross your arms and legs if they're crossed. And just take a moment before you close your eyes, before you try and focus or do anything else. Just take a moment just to sort of settle the body. Keep the eyes open and just looking directly ahead of yourself, just finding a soft gaze. So it kind of takes in the whole space around you, so you can see either side of you, above and below. And just maintaining that very soft focus. Just take a big, deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you breathe out through the mouth, just gently closing the eyes. So as you close the eyes, just starting to notice the other sensations. That feeling of contact, the body against the seat beneath you, feet on the floor, and the hands, the arms just resting on the legs. Just noticing the different sounds around you. So just settling into the space. And just noticing how the body feels this morning. So whether there's a heaviness or a lightness to the body. A sense of restlessness or stillness. Notice how the breath feels in the body. Again, not trying to control anything, just watching the natural rhythm of the breath. So just noticing when the mind has wandered off. The moment you realize it's wandered, just gently coming back to the breath again. Then just gently coming back to that feeling of contact. First the body on the seat, the feet on the floor, the hands and the arms on the legs. And then when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
So in the introduction, we described you. We described you as a former Buddhist monk, and my guess is there weren't a lot of people from your high school or college taking that path.
Not so many. Not so many.
So I thought one interesting way to begin would just be to talk about how that path was chosen for you. And my guess is it wasn't an easy decision, or at least your high school counselor probably didn't suggest it to you.
He didn't. You know, my high school counselor he asked me what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And my mum at the time was a massage therapist. And I said I wanted to be a massage therapist. And he said, "You're a pervert." So this was the kind of town I grew up in.
Yeah.
And they sent me on work experience, and he sent me to a hairdresser's. And I said I wanted to be a massage therapist. He was like, "Yeah, it's more or less the same thing." So this was kind of the mentality. Yeah. But yeah, meditation was around for me pretty early on. Mum took us to meditation classes probably when I was like 10 or 11 years old. So it was kind of there in the house, and it wasn't maybe as left field as it sounds. Definitely in my later teens, I kind of went through a few things that were quite difficult to deal with, sort of losing friends and that kind of thing. One accident in particular that really kind of made an impact, a car accident. And I think it had, people often ask kind of what makes you become a Buddhist monk, you know, or nun. I think for me it was twofold. Like, people often say, was it an escape, you know? And I think in some ways there was an element of that. I think there almost needs to be like a sense of desperation to go and do something like that. But there was also a kind of, like, I see it as a more sort of positive kind of search as well, that feeling of there must be something more to life than this. Because I'd gone to university, I did sort of sports science, and I was living a very normal kind of student life. And yet at the same time, it wasn't really kind of nourishing, it wasn't fulfilling in the sense that I thought it might be. So I just kind of thought one day, as one does, I should go and be a monk. And
a lot of people have that thought.
I mean, yeah, right?
People...
We've all experienced it at work one day. But as strange as it sounds, and because it really was like that. It wasn't, there was no, I can't say it was premeditated. There was no kind of list of pros and cons of being a monk. There was no discussing it with my girlfriend at the time.
Or I'll be a monk for 10 years and create an app.
Exactly. No grand plans like that. I had a really strong, let's call it a feeling one day. You know, people talk about callings, and I really felt like that was what I had to do. And I kind of honestly didn't know how to live another way. I felt that was the only choice I had in that moment.
Then did you have hair at the time?
You know, funny you should. I reckon I'd shaved it off about a month beforehand.
Oh wow!
Not in preparation. I think I was just going through that phase.
Yeah.
And trying out different hairstyles. And so I was pretty much ready to go.
That was
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about the training you underwent? You were with both the Tibetan and the Theravadan tradition?
Yeah, so I trained in the Theravadan school kind of first, which again probably most of you know, but sort of Southeast Asia. The Burmese kind of school, the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition was what interested me in particular. And life as a Burmese monk, it was pretty strict, you know. And I'm not suggesting that Tibetan's not. It is, but there's a different kind of approach, you know. And so you do a lot of meditation. And not much else happens. So my own, as you get up, you meditate, you go to bed. You know, it's quite an austere sort of lifestyle.
And you did that for several years?
No, I did. I trained in the Theravadan tradition for about five years. But you train first as a lay person, then as a novice monk. Okay. I took full ordination in the Tibetan tradition, in northern India. Okay. And look, they're different approaches, but same essence. It's always the same essence. It's awareness and compassion. And I just felt that for me there were some aspects of the mind, the heart, the mind that I hadn't necessarily explored or approached in the way that I felt would be helpful. And I happened to meet a teacher from the Tibetan tradition And my friends always joked about me sort of, they see Buddhism as kind of football teams, so the different colors, the different kind of, because my friends, like they say, small hometown kind of, you know. And they're like, hold on, you've gone from the orange team to the red team? Like, what's happening here? So I became a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And
got traded or...
Exactly. They didn't want me anymore. They just moved me over there. And I spent sort of 5 years kind of then studying now. I think...
And did you live, is this true that you lived in Russia, you taught meditation in Russia for 4 years?
I did, yeah. I was in Russia for 4.5 years.
As a monk?
So 2.5 years of that was as a monk.
Okay.
And there aren't a lot of Buddhist monks in Moscow.
I didn't
actually,
think so.
I found out.
Okay.
It was a very interesting experience. So when I finished a period of training at the monastery, they asked me to go and teach it in the meditation center there in Moscow. And I thought, wow, that sounds fun. That sounds exotic. And it was. I have to say that Russia gets a lot of bad press, especially at the moment. And I have to say that the people that I met and the community that I sort of lived in and around, they were incredible people, and very passionate about Dharma, about meditation, and I feel really fortunate to have spent that time there. I learned a lot, and I would say even the beginnings of Headspace kind of happened in Moscow. I started to see kind of lay people coming along to the center who really wanted to learn meditation, but were really struggling to get past the whole kind of guy in robes, incense, bells, and all that stuff, you know. Yeah. And I get it, you know, because at one time I thought the same thing, you know. So I started to think, you know, well, what does this look like outside of the monastery? What does this look like in a suit instead of robes? So it was really, that was the beginning of that thinking, I would say.
And so when you met your co-founder, Rich, this was about 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an update, so it's been downloaded 21 million times, I think is the latest.
To, yeah.
Did you guys have any sense back then of like, wow, we're onto something, people are going to be, the phone is the new entry point?
We're both ridiculously optimistic. So I think definitely there was a sense. I think meditation is timeless and it's universal. So there was no surprise that meditation was going to be, you know, going to become a thing. At the same time, I don't think either of us really understood the scale and the potential. I do remember a conversation really early on, you know, kind of maybe even in the first month, where we very kind of foolishly said, I don't know who was fooling who, you know, but we sat and chat in front, you know, with each other, and we said, look, if we could reach somewhere between 10 and 100 million people, we would feel like we had made a meaningful kind of impact in the world, you know, and we're on the way. You know, I think it's a good start. I feel like it's not just about the introduction, it's also about how to maintain a stable practice. Because I think there are lots of things that we get excited about in life and we try it and it's like, oh, this is so good, and then we don't necessarily do it all the time. So I think that's kind of the next kind of challenge is, you know, is how to really create a stable practice with community. Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful. And so how do you, because you were very impacted by your teachers, I'm sure, and that community around it. There's been, and not just the Headspace app, but some criticism of all kinds of different apps. It's like, it's great for on one level, but people need a teacher, they need a community. How do you see that? Do you see that Headspace introduces them in a way that then they can look to their local community, or do you see that the app actually can provide that in a way that somebody can watch a video, or like there's Vipassana retreats, right, where you just watch Goenka on video. So how do you see the technology part and the in-person part?
It's interesting, you know, I heard, I will come to that. There was I was telling Soren last week, the abbot of my monastery, former retreat master, came and spent a week with us at Headspace. And it was really kind of inspiring, and we were talking about the different retreats, and at the monastery they're different. They have like a 1-year retreat, they have a 4-year retreat. And if any of you are interested, just let me know. And the 4-year retreat from the pool this time. So there was one particular teacher they wanted to teach, and he couldn't kind of come. So into the 4-year retreat, they were beaming him in every day via Skype, you know. And I was like, wow, like, you know, and they really kind of feel that works. I think there's two different things. I think there's the teacher and there's the medium. So when my teacher was out last week, he was saying the thing that kind of concerned him most was that whoever is doing the teaching, whatever the medium, that they have direct experience, that they have the practice. But then as the medium itself, that we've seen over the years, there have been many mediums through which to kind of express Dharma and meditation. And I feel like the app is just one. We never set out kind of to create an app. We, at first...
You're doing events, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Rich kind of... When I met Rich, and I stand by this, the app will never work. You know, Rich said to me we should create the Nike Plus of meditation. Now, bear in mind, I don't think I even had a phone at this time. I definitely didn't know what an app was. I said, no, look, there has to be a teacher in the room. You know, this isn't going to work otherwise. Yeah. So we started doing events, and we did events for sort of 2 years or so. And eventually people kind of said, oh, it'd be really nice to have something to take home. So we're like, okay, well, maybe that's okay, you know, and so started recording some. And then people who couldn't come to the event said, well, can we buy those things? And so eventually it became an app. And I was of the belief when we started that there had to be a teacher in the room.
Got it.
And I've been proved wrong, as I have been many times in my life. But I've kind of been proved wrong because we now have people who've used it 3 or 4 years, every single day, and who write in and say, it's changed my life. And I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I never would have believed that little amount of meditation a day kind of would make that much difference to that many people.
Yeah. And do you feel how do you orient towards like if there's a teacher can kind of guide, like I'll do an interview with you and I kind of guide. Do you have a sense that they can guide themselves through the variety of meditations that are on the...
I think there's still a lot more work for us to do in terms of personalization, and it's something we're working really hard on at the moment in terms of recommendations and how people can actually find their journey. So I think it can be quite overwhelming if you come to an app and there's all this couple of thousand hours of content, and where do you start? And even if you know where to start, where then do you go? So I think we have a lot of work to do on that. But my favorite still, like the team won't like this because they've done so much work in the last like 4 or 5 years. But when we first launched, it was version 1. I don't know if there'll be anyone here who used version 1, but it was basically 365 days in a row.
Okay.
And once you got on the train, you either stayed on the train or you got off. Like there was nowhere else, there were no other routes you could kind of go. So in that sense, I really liked it as a teacher because I knew what had been yesterday, and I kind of knew where we were going. So there was a sense of that. So right now, and then we kind of went, okay, but people don't want to wait 6 months until they talk about relationships because they're struggling with a relationship right now. Yeah. So we moved to a kind of more modular thing where people could choose. And right now we're trying to kind of find, well, what's the in-between, what's the sweet spot? Where you still feel like there's a sense of kind of guidance, someone holding your hand, but equally you can access content that you need right now.
Beautiful. And how do you, you're probably one of the busiest meditation teachers I know in the sense of you're in the studio a lot, and you have, I don't know how many employees now, there's a growing company with a couple hundred employees?
Yeah, a couple hundred,
Your life, though, as a monk is committed to, like, it feels like who you are as a person, committed to meditation, to silence, to how did you get, do you ever wonder, like, how you found yourself in this position, and how do you maintain your own practice with all this seeming responsibility that you now have to the company and to the community?
Well, my wife, my children, my friends, and my family keep me incredibly grounded in my life. I definitely never kind of envisaged this happening. Certainly neither Rich or I remember when we started, we said, okay, we'll do something, but we'll never have more than 20 people in the team. Because we don't want to become this big company. And then it was like, okay, well, shit, we had 25, we're really going to need a few more people. Okay, so let's cap it at 50. And this has kind of continued. I think, we've tried to kind of be really careful how we've scaled, and sometimes, I think it can appear as though we're moving quite slowly. I know to some it will feel like we've moved really fast. To others, like we're moving quite slowly. We're just trying to kind of do it right and thoughtfully. I think the way we stay grounded as a team, and I think having my teacher here last week was a really important kind of part of that, was just to stay rooted in authenticity. I'm not interested in kind of developing, even if it reaches hundreds of millions of people, an app which is just kind of, throwaway. Like I want this to lead to kind of meaningful change in the way that the techniques were originally kind of designed for. So we're really kind of passionate about just always going back to the monastery. And I don't mean physically, but in our work. And we do that in our customer service team, we do it in our product team, in our design team. Even the colors in the app all come, it's a simple thing, but at the very beginning, it was like, they're all the color palettes from the Tibetan tankers. And like every single thing in there, there's a pretty good chance that it has its root in the monastery kind of somewhere. So I feel like as long as we stay true to that, and as long as we stay true to, we have a very dedicated science team kind of now who I feel like it's really important. There are some pretty big claims being kind of made. I'd like to stay clear of those. And so we have a science team that are dedicated to making sure that if we do pass on any information, it's not, look, meditation can do this or mindfulness can do this. It's like, in a study, this is what we found. It may have that impact. Right. It may not. That's kind of not what meditation's about. It's about understanding the mind. It's not about fixing something. So I feel as long as we stay true to those values and ideals, then we'll stay grounded in our work.
And what do you feel like the heart of the practice is to you? You had said before about awareness and compassion. If I can get one thing across through this app, is it that, or what do you feel like if there is if we put that message into a soundbite?
The tricky, and I will give you an answer. The tricky thing about it is wisdom and compassion are inseparable.
Yeah.
And I think some teachers will focus more on one, on awareness, others more on compassion. I do think if we practice one with integrity and honesty, then inevitably we discover the other. I feel the thing that is missing most is compassion. So that's probably what I lean more towards in my teaching. Is what
self-compassion, compassion to other, all of it.
The whole thing, the whole compassion thing. It was what I felt I missed most in my early years of training, and it's what resonated most when I became a Tibetan Buddhist monk. So for me, that's probably, I'm a bit biased, obviously, but that's the thing I try and kind of lean towards a bit more.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because I think we both started in the mindfulness world because I met you back. I think Wisdom 2.0 was starting actually right around when Headspace was also starting, so we were kind of tuned into a similar frequency. And since mindfulness now is popular, and it's in some ways, I don't know if it's a big business, but there are very successful businesses that are now doing it, and some I think with a lot of integrity, some with less integrity. As this movement, or if you call it a movement, but as this interest grows, do you have any thoughts on how it can stay kind of to its roots, which I think there's a roots of generosity, and so once you get economics into anything, conferences including, it creates more complexity. It's not that it's wrong or bad, and I think that's something that I have a lot of questions about, and I don't know if you also, like, what's free in the app, what do we charge for, how do we, if we really want people to learn compassion, how do we make that as accessible as possible? At the same time, I find that when I pay for something, I actually use it more. And so how do you have some thoughts on how you guys find that balance, or is it still an open exploration?
It's a minefield for sure. I think, so we have our philosophy at Headspace, and I'm not suggesting that is the right philosophy. It's just the one that has developed and that we feel comfortable with. We actually started out as a not-for-profit. That didn't give us what we needed at that time in the UK in the way that not-for-profit works. I think there was also something interesting about, I don't know how it is here in the US, but charities in the UK are a little bit old and stuffy, and they're not necessarily kind of seen as, up with the times. And so we kind of very deliberately kind of made the intention to do that. In doing that, we had to kind of find another way of making it available for those people who couldn't afford it, couldn't pay for it. We went down the supplying NGO routes, and having a freemium model where there is always something free on the app. I think there are many, many different kind of models to choose from. Again, I'm not suggesting one is right and one is wrong, but I feel like it's up to us actually, and I mean all of us. I mean as whether it's as teachers, whether it's as advocates, whether it's as consumers, like we should be really interested, not in the cell, not in the wrapper, but like who are you going to trust your mind with? If you go into a hospital, You want a doctor who's just read a book about heart surgery. You want a doctor who's done heart surgery.
Yeah.
You know, so you should be we have a joint responsibility to hold those people to account and to ensure that they're teaching us something authentic. So that would be my feeling.
That's great. So that it's actually the responsibility of all of us to assess the quality of a teaching.
And look, again, because I'm not so involved in the business side of things, I can say this. I really encourage people, use the free bit. Don't pay for it. Use the free bit. Find out for yourself before you make any kind of commitment. We had someone who contacted us. So they've been in the Olympics, in the Rio Olympics. And they've been part of a team, and they'd won a gold medal. And she wrote to us, and she said, I feel a bit cheeky kind of asking this, but for 2 years I've been using Take 10, because it's the free bit.
Yeah.
And we've just won a gold medal at the Olympics, and I wondered if I could have a subscription.
Which is $9.99 a month or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one, I couldn't believe that it hadn't been made available kind of to that athlete. But also, it was really heartwarming and reassuring for me to know that somebody could use that again and again for a couple of years and still get real benefit out of it.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are lots of different themes and contexts to explore within the app, but also, the essence of mindfulness is found even in the most simplest kind of short technique. So don't necessarily, think that you have to go further. There's something there even in that bit.
Beautiful. So our time is almost up. Is there anything you want to leave us with that you didn't get a chance to mention that you want to add in? This is the Mindfulness in America conference, and I'm really happy to have you here because I think both I appreciate you as a person, and I also feel like the interplay with technology and mindfulness is something we have to explore. If we don't involve ourselves, we're missing a big opportunity.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you want to leave us with as parting words?
No, I would. We were talking off stage just a moment ago, and someone was saying kind of how the fitness movement had grown over the years, and how there are now 10 times more people wearing fitness clothes than there are actually exercising, and how the same had happened in yoga, and kind of now everyone's walking around in yoga pants, which is great. They look awesome, but they're probably not doing yoga. And all I would say is the same is true of meditation. We can sit here and we can talk about it today, and you can go home and you can read about it. You can even download an app and have it on your phone. But unless we're doing the practice, the change doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So let's not do another fitness revolution. Let's not do another yoga revolution. Let's create a revolution where we do actually kind of practice.
In a revolution.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you so much.